Hello, students of the Great Mysteries. Welcome back to Shock's Talks. I'm Shakti, and this is our weekly checkpoint where we just touch base about the things we're researching and what we're learning. I'm currently reading Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light by Niara Terela Isley. And this is my second episode covering this book. I'm about halfway through now, and I'm taking my time. It's a 500-page book or so. And it's super dense emotionally, energetically. It's heavy. It's hard to get through. I'm having weird dreams. I am empathizing with the woman who wrote the story. It's not a story, it's her life, but it's her story. So basically, this is the account of someone who had contact as a child, who had a history of abduction, who then blocked all of that out, went into the military, ended up at the Nevada test site and Area 51, and she was brought out into this radar test range where she was shown anomalous objects, UFOs, and then brought to some kind of medical facility where she was basically tortured um, in a very methodical way designed to block memory. And then as life went on, she got deeper into unraveling her past by meeting Bud Hopkins, a famous researcher of abductees and hypnotherapist who began the movement of using hypnotic regression to uncover abduction stories. And she started to unravel, her own PTSD. And then her life kind of got too enmeshed in the topic for a while, which happens to a lot of people. She took a break, stepped back, and then sort of like went back to normal reality, but continued her research, continued connecting with other experiencers, going to groups and trying to learn about the topic. And she eventually moved into like more of like the healing modalities and working with her own soul, healing her soul. She even started uncovering past life information about her starseed origins, and ultimately wrote this book to help others. And it's a pretty powerful book, and I'm actually really into it. There's a lot of history in here. She's very smart, and it's fascinating the way that she sort of bounces between her different personality aspects. You have these moments where you're really seeing her very straightforward militaristic background shining through, her analytical mind drawing conclusions based on the things that she's learning about the UFO history. Her ability to recall important details around this topic is also very impressive. And then you see these little snippets of her more poetic, expressive, lyrical, spiritual self coming through in the form of these poems and medicine stories that are woven throughout the book. And then you also get to read some of her regression transcripts, which is always pretty heavy and pretty intense. So let me read you a couple quotes that I wrote down from my readings this week. And while I pull that up, I was just going to let you all know that I've moved for a temporary relocation for work. So I was living in New Mexico. Now I'm in California. And I'm really proud of myself for not missing a beat and still showing up for Shocks Talks. The main reason I make this channel is for myself to stay motivated with my research into this topic, because I have my own complicated history with all of this information. And I'm on a very similar journey as Niara Terela Isley, in the sense that I am seeking to understand parts of my experience that are obscured and also repressed. And I'm also just trying to make sense of this bigger picture reality because it's fascinating. And right now in the UAP UFO world, there's a lot of hype around these missing scientists. It's a pretty horrible story that's evolving. there's, again, like, as is the case with so much of this information, there's this kind of like ebb and flow where a couple things happen that are interesting and mysterious, then everybody jumps on the bandwagon, everything kind of ramps up, it gets blown out of proportion, and then it kind of calms back down, and they're saying now the story is more like, okay, 11 or 14 scientists, realistically they're probably not all linked, but there are a few notable ones. General Neil McCasland is still a very intriguing and strange story that has not been understood by any of us. We don't know what happened. We don't know where he is, why he just went missing. And he has this really major portfolio when it comes to the UAP topic and working for the Air Force. And then you have Monica Reza, another scientist who was also connected to the work that Neil McCasland was overseeing, and then there are others. But just quickly, I'll give you a couple notes about that, and then we'll go into my book notes. So General William Neil McCasland, February 27th, 2026 is when he goes missing. It was a late Friday morning on Quail Run Court in Albuquerque near Sandia Mountains. A repairman sees him at the house at 10 a.m. About an hour later, his wife leaves for a medical appointment. An hour later, she's back and her husband is gone. He left behind his prescription glasses, his phone, which had been switched off, and his smartwatch. And what was missing was his red backpack, his wallet, and a .38 caliber revolver and holster. At 3:07, his wife reports him missing. So she said that she has some indication that he may have planned not to be found. She did talk about some general light depression that he was experiencing as an aging retired man who was having some health issues and things like that. Um, and other people also commented that he doesn't really fit the profile of someone who would just wander off because of like extreme mental health issues. So it's still mysterious why he left. He was also a really experienced hiker and outdoorsman. Like the weekend before, he had just biked 60 miles. So he wasn't like some feeble, frail man just wandering off into the wilderness with mental issues. He knew his hiking trails by heart. County officers checked all the local cameras, neighborhood, like mail cameras and GoPros in the area. And the investigation spread. All these different people were brought in to look for him, and they just really didn't find anything. They found a sweatshirt that may or may not have been his. It was an Air Force sweatshirt. They couldn't prove that it was linked to him. And he worked at the Pentagon, and the office he worked for oversaw the ultimate category of black projects, programs related to war, where possible UFO crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs would hide. And he also commanded the Air Force Research Lab from 2011 to 2014. He was involved into the STARS Academy, which is Tom DeLonge's effort to bring disclosure to the U.S. And yeah, it goes on and on. So that's kind of a little update on what's going on there. A lot of these notes came from a video that News Nation did, and also a video that Jesse Michaels did on this topic on American Alchemy. So I'll link that for you below if you want to go deeper into this story. I would say this is the important one to keep an eye on, more so than some of the other things that are coming out. But just to link him to Monica Reza, she went missing June 22nd, 2025 in the LA National Forest. So strangely, another kind of like outdoor situation. She was hiking with a friend, and that friend like all of a sudden turned around and she wasn't there. So that's very bizarre. Expert mountain rescuer teams went looking for Monica, and often hikers who get lost can survive for 2 to 3 weeks, but many weeks and months have passed and no one could find her. And she was also well equipped with a backpack, hiking boots, and plenty of water. So she had a lot of friends and people in the community who really cared about her, who did huge efforts to consistently go out and continue looking and continue looking. And, they did they did try for so long and haven't been able to find anything. And so yeah, there's a lot of talk on the internet right now about Amy Eskridge. She's someone who actually was, I think she was in the Huntsville, Alabama area. She's a scientist as well, and she was posting a lot of like semi-drunk videos and talking about a lot of things, and was a little bit like, she seemed like a little more mentally unstable in some ways just based on how she was expressing herself. That doesn't necessarily mean anything in terms of like why she went missing or what happened to her, but it does bring another factor into the mix that has to be examined when you're talking about people possibly taking their lives or finding themselves in some kind of precarious situation due to some instability. So it's hard to say what went on there, and I'll keep you posted if I start to come to any conclusions or if anyone finds anyone or figures anything out. But right now, I think what's important is that we just wish well to the families, send love and respect to everyone who cares about these people, try to keep looking for them, try to keep understanding what went on, try not to blow it out of proportion, just be methodical and steady and continue to connect the dots, but not in that kind of like manic over the top kind of way, because it's not really that useful. It doesn't help anyone. And so that's what I'm doing with that information, at least for now. So here are my notes from Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light. Just some paragraphs and notes and quotes that I pulled out that I thought were good, that helped to encapsulate a lot of what I'm reading. I watched my friends and acquaintances living in the old reality I had once occupied, longing to return to it and knowing I never could. I felt incredibly lonely. I was out on the edge of things, a fringe dweller, hat in my hand, knowing I better keep certain things to myself or I would no longer be welcome. It did nothing for my self-esteem, nor did it help me to deal with the inner fear that swelled up at times and became my terror. I kept it under lock and key inside. I couldn't let it out to lay waste to my life. I put this in here because it's always important to remember how isolating anomalous trauma can be and how much courage it takes to walk with a foot in all of these different worlds. For people that are deep in this and have actually been a part of abduction experiences or military experiences or past life experiences and all of the above, you're really kind of evolving in a way that a lot of people don't have to evolve. It's kind of like this mental split where now you know things that other people don't know. You know it in your bones, in your body, and you can't get other people to believe you. You can't make them understand what you understand, and so it can be a really painful and isolating place to be. And so it's just worth noting and having compassion for these people that go through these things, and also for those of us who are dealing with anything similar to that and trying to work through it, even if it's just understanding things about the nature of reality that you feel like the status quo hasn't gotten hip to yet. You just have to breathe your way through. You just have to find your own path. And I take a lot of heart in these examples of people who have done just that. Information, this is again from the book, information about mind control programs has been leaking out into the mainstream for some time. In 1975, a mind control project called MK Ultra was publicly exposed. 20,000 pages of documentation on MK Ultra was found under the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, and congressional hearings were convened. Oh no, the cats are in their wild mood right now. I don't know if you can hear them. Okay, focusing. Um, and congressional hearings were convened in 1977 to examine this information. It was found that the CIA had used as many as 80 front organizations, which are organizations set up and controlled overtly by a parent organization, allowing the parent organization to avoid blame or culpability for wrongdoing. Through such agencies, the CIA was able to conduct their mind control research. Such research was usually tantamount to torture. Many of the individuals in these front organizations were not aware of the covert CIA involvement. The False Memory Syndrome Foundation is just such a front organization whose agencies are highly suspect, and as such, their research and conclusions patently unreliable and flawed. She brings this up because she was considering the possibility that some of her memories were false memories. She also explores screen memories and how memories can be buried and blocked for people. And so, basically, the reason I included this quote is just to remind us all that there is a true history of such programs existing in the United States, and what we know through FOIA, even with these 20,000 documents that help us to understand programs like MK Ultra, is just the tip of the iceberg. So whenever you feel like, oh, that's really conspiratorial thinking, that's so crazy, why would anyone do that, blah, 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 blah. Well, just look at the evidence. It's real. It has happened. A lot of weird shit has happened, and more has happened that we don't have access to. So it's worth considering the possibility that people who come forward with these stories are not just lunatics, but actually are onto something. And in order to figure out what's going on, we have to listen to the stories. The anecdotal evidence must be taken in and considered. So she goes on to say, how did this happen in the land of the free and the home of the brave? Because she was a true patriot, and people who join the military, they do it because they love and respect the country, and they love and respect that system. They want to honor and defend and protect, and they're very serious people. A lot of the time, they're really smart people too, and they are going into this with kind of an open heart and, a positive agenda. Like, they're trying to do the right thing, they're trying to do something noble a lot of the time, in part through Operation or Project Paperclip. So now we're going to go back and learn a little history of how some of this stuff may have come to be. So, after World War II, under the auspices of Project Paperclip, German scientists from Hitler's Third Reich were brought to the USA, many given American-sounding names, and put to work for our own government and military. Some of these scientists were the very ones who had conducted horrific experiments in mind control on Jews and others detained in the Nazi concentration camps. Perhaps in secret programs here in the USA, they wanted to know what they knew. Why? To apply that ill-gotten knowledge for their own purposes, and worse, to continue such research. So again, a little nugget of history to remind us that these things aren't that fantastical. They're not that hard to imagine when you look at the paper trail and how some of this came to be. The seed of some of this stuff, it comes from a pretty evil place, undeniably evil. And how are such secrets kept in what is supposed to be a free and democratic society? Well, through the National Security Act of 1947. Again, we're going back and looking at the history, and as you know from season 1 of Shocks Talks, the UFO history, while there is some ancient history as well, there is this persistent presence and this ramping up of activity and the tracking of such activity in secret programs that began in the 40s. And this was global, not just in the US, but there is a huge emphasis, in my understanding, on things that were going on in the US because I'm a US citizen. And so it's like this 80+ year cover up. And now we're looking at how it was 1947 when the National Security Act came to be. It was signed into law and implemented by President Truman just 2 months after the Roswell UFO crash. It was dream come true legislation for those wanting to do things behind closed and impenetrable doors concerning the study of alien technology and all manner of other unsavory research. It made them untouchable for any heinous acts they might commit, even in courts of law, due to reasons of national security. So we can see how there are these little moments, and Richard Dolan talks about this a lot. There are these moments throughout history where power grabs can be made, strategic moves can be made that are actually setting people up for other future endeavors, and this is a really good example of one of those strategic moves. Implementing this National Security Act just gave people that want to do sneaky bad things a lot of protection. So just something to notice, that I don't know how much control we have over these things or how much we can really involve ourselves, but we do need to follow along and start to understand what's really going on just under the surface so we can just be a more informed people. In order for us all to come together and make positive changes, we have to be informed, and it takes a long time to learn these things, which again is why I show up here at this anomalous study hall once a week, because I'm committed to continuing my learning, and I'm glad that you're here with me. So I would love to hear what you think about any of this in the comments. I'm always asking people to like, share, and subscribe, just like everybody else on YouTube. So if you're feeling generous, it's free for you, helps me out. I would love anything that you're willing to offer to support my channel. And then there's more to this history. So there are these stories. And now we're going into the territory of the lore. And so we're moving away from the paper trail into the lore, but we're going to look at these in parallel and see. This is the link that Isley is making in her book, and others have also made in the UFO community. February 20th through 21st, 1954 is when Eisenhower allegedly met with aliens and struck a treaty. So yes, we're going into lore territory, but there's a reason. So it was also in April 1954 where there was an alleged meeting at Holloman Air Force Base where the gray aliens, were given permission to do abductions on humans and animals in exchange for advanced tech. Whistleblower Milton William Cooper stated, and this is from a book he wrote, let me just look it up real quick. I think it's called something with a white horse. Milton William Cooper. What is your book called? Behold a Pale Horse. Behold a Pale Horse. That's the name of his book. He passed in 2001. And he's talking about this treaty, this alleged treaty that occurred. And these were the terms, according to Milton William Cooper. The treaty stated that the aliens would not interfere in our Earth affairs, and we would not interfere in theirs. We would keep their presence on Earth a secret. They would furnish us with advanced technology and would help us in our technological development. So just imagine for a moment, going into this lore that during this time in the early mid-50s, this treaty was struck. And it was because, imagine these people coming across these intelligent beings with this advanced tech and being like, oh my God, we really need to get our hands on this and study it. And these gray aliens being like, yeah, you can do that. We will give you some tech. Just let us do some science here. And, this has been circulating for a while. A lot of people think this is highly likely. And I think it is very possible, if not probable, that something like this has occurred because there are so many stories of human collaboration with non-human intelligence and so many accounts of people seeing aliens working alongside of humans. And a lot of what we see developing in secret programs and leaking out through military whistleblowers and the like are derivatives of this relationship, not just the tech, but also the consciousness study, because these beings are more evolved than us humans in certain ways when it comes to consciousness. We all know that they possess these telepathic skills and that all of the communications that occur with them are telepathic. And so they also have a very strong ability to do mind control. These aliens are just really, really good at getting into the psyche and manipulating humans. And so, of course, that's something that the humans are interested. We already saw that they were working on this. And so why wouldn't they want to learn more from these beings, for all the different reasons? But the number one reason during this time of national security is this strategic advantage that everyone's trying to develop in all the major countries. And so these aliens basically, they tell the US in this lore, in this story, that they would not make any treaty with any other Earth nation, which is a little sus. And they could abduct humans on a limited and periodic basis for the purpose of medical examination and monitoring of our development, with the stipulation that the humans would not be harmed, would be returned to their point of abduction, would have no memory of the event, and that the alien nation would furnish Majestic 12, MJ-12, with a list of all human contacts and abductees on a regularly scheduled basis. This is an important piece of information because if the aliens were doing this, that's one layer. But if they were also informing human organizations with the names of the people that they were doing this to, that puts us in an extremely vulnerable position. And by us, I mean any experiencers or abductees, anyone who's had any kind of contact or experience. If that information was being delivered to other humans, that puts those humans in a vulnerable position. And you see this with stories like, for example, Dan Sherman, from who wrote the book Above Black and did that big interview recently with Jesse Michaels, and Niara Terela Isley, is speculating in her exploration of her own journey with the military that maybe they knew that she was an abductee, which is why they brought her to this open test range one night and had her observe as a radar operator, because that was her position at the time, working on the radar equipment that was meant to track fast objects in the sky. And they brought the radar out onto this range to track UFOs, which they could not stand a chance at tracking with their clunky equipment at the time. And so there is this idea in her mind that perhaps she was flagged as someone who had some kind of contact with extraterrestrials previous to her involvement with the military. And as she digs into her own multidimensional past, she learns that, from at least from her perspective, that she is in fact a hybrid and a starseed. So she has like an alien soul basically, and she also has some connection to the hybridization program. So I wanted to tie this in with a little tidbit from a crop circle that occurred in 2002. And it's the one that had like the gray alien face on it, I believe. I have to check up on what this thing really looked like. But there was this message in the crop circle that said, "Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Believe there is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing." So this was a famous message decoded from this crop circle in 2002. And this happened in England. And okay, it was often called the alien head and binary disk formation. So I'm just bringing that up because part of the lore here is that there are multiple species of aliens with different agendas. Some people have negative feelings about the grays. Some people have more neutral to positive feelings about them. Some people like to start projecting onto these beings are good, these beings are evil, these ones are trying to take over, these ones are trying to collaborate, these ones want to save us, these ones want to harm us, harvest us, all these different things. We can't really say yet. We don't have enough evidence, even anecdotal, to really be able to draw these conclusions, because the deeper you look, the more nuance there is. And what I find fascinating about many abductees and contactees is that they often start off feeling very scared about their experiences, and then they later come to a place of feeling like they were part of some kind of soul contract before they even came into this life, or that they on some level agreed to have these collaborations with the aliens. And even though it was scary at the beginning, it ends up helping them in the long run, or they learn and evolve and grow as a result of these abductions. Now, some people, even Niara Terela in her book, considers the possibility that this is just like the Stockholm syndrome, and you just start to bond with your captors. But I think that it's possible that that could be a true story for a lot of people, where it does feel scary at first because they don't have the mental infrastructure to support such a strange reality. And later, as they develop that, they're able to examine it in a more complete way and then draw different conclusions. So very fascinating, but this is a common theme with many experiencers, is that kind of that switch as they go through the process of understanding what happened to them. So just again on this crop circle, the message was encoded in binary code on this disc-like shape that appeared next to the alien head. And I think that's it for today. We're at 30 minutes, so I'm going to keep this kind of short and sweet. Right now, I'm still playing around with my remote viewing and my psi. I think I'll talk more about that next time. I still want to continue with my research into the practical application of the out-of-body experience. I want to have the out-of-body experience at will. It's something that I'm working on. The next book that I'm going to read about that is the book by Nancy Trivolato. And if you remember here on Shocks Talks, when I read about Luis Monero and his book Demystifying the Out-of-Body Experience, she is kind of related to that same group of people, a lot of them coming out of Brazil to the United States and working on this topic. I am just feeling like I'm learning so much about psi right now. It's really interesting to think about how people are developing these skills at what seems to be a rapid pace, how the tools and techniques and methods that are being shared widely on the internet are evolving every day. People are discovering new games, new ways to develop psi, opening up their mind sight, playing with psychokinesis, getting better and better at remote viewing, and how there's like this kind of playful energy around it all. So even though studying this topic can put us in kind of an intense, heavy space, it's important to take breaks from that and find your happy place again too, because what we're learning about our human potential and developing psi abilities is that being in a joyful, playful spirit is actually a great way to bring those abilities online. And it is the counter movement to the old way of having to use trauma inoculation to bring about psychic abilities. That is one way. It's not the only way. I've been experimenting myself with this joyful method and finding that it is bringing about some interesting results. And maybe we'll talk more about psi next time. Thanks for being here. Give the video a like, and I'll see you next time on Shocks Talks.